Hello.
Oh, okay. There's some sound. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
Good.
Hello, Melinda. I'm Christopher. Nice to meet you.
You as well.
So I'll just dive into this real quick and try not to take up too much of our time. For everybody
Okay.
who will be watching, this is for the Foster Powell Takeout and Delivery group on Facebook and anybody else who ends up seeing this. But I am sitting with Melinda, who is the owner and operator of Bar Carlo. How you doing? How you holding up?
I'm keeping busy, but that's my coping mechanism. I just
Yeah,
keep moving.
yeah, keep on swimming.
Yep.
Uh, Very cool. So tell us a little bit about Bar Carlo, about it, what it stands for, and sort of how it came to be, and its place in the neighborhood.
Okay. So we opened right before the big economic crash, and there were three of us at that point. And we initially were going to be an Italian fine dining restaurant, and we realized pretty quickly that that was going to take more work, and maybe the neighborhood wasn't really ready for that yet. This was like '07, '08.
Mhm.
And one of my initial business partners, Marcus, who is the father of Carlo, he and I had both done breakfast before, so that's where we were like, okay, we know how to do that at least, so we can open with that. And then over the course of the years, lost business partners and started taking more creative control of it. And I'm from Southern California, and a lot of the flavors that you see on the menu now are things that I grew up with. My family is Mexican American, so it was really important to me when I moved here to Portland to be able to get some of those flavors and to not have canned salsa on stuff. So we've just kind of been moving in that arc and trying to figure out really what's the best fit for the neighborhood. And I think that's like a constant question, like what the
Yeah.
neighborhood wants. So we see our place in the neighborhood as like the place that you can go to morning, noon, or night and get a home cooked meal that is prepared well. Like we use a lot of the same preparation techniques that you would see in a higher end restaurant. We don't really buy anything that's already made. We make pretty much everything in house, which makes our labor costs really high, which is another reason why this particular time is so difficult for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we can't just run the show with like one or two people. It's too big of a machine.
Mhm. So on the subject of a place in the neighborhood and just knowing, like, just feeling what the neighborhood needs or wants, do you see a potential time in the future where there is a place for a fine dining Italian restaurant in the Foster Powell area?
I mean,
Or is that sort
yeah,
of is that sort of like a Northeast Portland downtown?
it's nothing that I've ever thought
Mm.
about because it's totally outside of my box.
Yeah,
And it's been just me for like a decade now, so I wouldn't want to go back to that.
yeah,
But yeah, Foster's definitely getting to the point where it can support more and more businesses. I mean, we
yeah,
see that influx, we see families, we see a lot of the people who just want a $2 beer aren't necessarily the main demographic in Foster anymore.
yeah. I still love $2 beer.
Everybody does.
uh, so you've been in the neighborhood for about 10 years, or you've been open for business in the neighborhood for about 10 years?
We've been open for 12 years.
12
I've been
years. 12
the
years.
sole owner for 10.
Nice, nice, excellent. So what is it about Foster Powell that you love? Like, what are your highlights about the neighborhood?
I guess what I like about it is that it's a little bit gritty still. You meet real people. It's definitely like the relationships that you make with your customers are less surface. They're way more like you get to know these people, their families. And like that's one of the nice things that we've got to experience is like, seeing couples get together, get pregnant, get married, all that stuff. So like you end up becoming kind of woven into people's lives.
Yeah.
And that's
Um,
great.
I worked in the restaurant industry for about 22 years, and always knowing like that idea of the tapestry or being woven together. Food is the place where we get to do life with each other, even if it's
Exactly.
a table apart or a bar stool apart. That's
hmm Yeah.
uh,
And then the whole process of actually making the food and giving it to them and seeing their satisfaction. It's such a rewarding experience to be a part of versus like just making something for sale, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Had you always been in food prior to this, or has there been a couple of different career ideas?
I've done a lot of things. I'm kind of a workaholic, which is my dad's fault. So when I was younger and I would be doing odd jobs and going to school, it was always like more administrative work. And then when I finally was like, I have to finish my college degree. This is ridiculous. This has been 10 years of going to a fucking real university as a part-time student. I quit my job, took out a loan to cover my last year, and started going to school full time, and immediately was bored out of my mind. Like there just wasn't enough for me to do. So I started getting jobs at little restaurants close to where I lived in San Diego, and pretty quickly realized that that was where I needed to be.
Cool.
So that was probably like 2001, 2002, something like that, that I started doing that. So it's been a bit. And then moved up here, started working at a McMenamins like we all do. And I think that was my first introduction to kitchen work. And then bar managed at Acme, which is now the White Owl Social Club.
Yep.
And that's where I met Marcus and Kevin, my initial business partners. And we took on this project. And I had to kind of learn all new skills, which was great because I had a lot of background from accounting when I was doing administrative work. And I had to learn how to cook. And so I had to teach myself how to cook. And because the cooking that you do at McMenamins is not really cooking. I mean, it is, but it's not, you know.
And
so,
I was going to ask you if there was cooking in your family growing up, but that probably answers part
well,
of that question.
my grandma was an amazing cook, and she made pretty much every meal from scratch, but my mother's a horrible cook.
That's awesome.
And really never had the patience for it.
All right. So the next couple questions, as we get ready to wind this down, we'll make this as quick as possible. These ones are a little bit more serious a question. So you feel free to pass on a question if it's just not right. Like it's like, no, we're not ready to answer that or anything.
Okay.
Well, first, let's start with an easy one. Tell us about your donation program that you've been working on.
Well, we don't have the ability to keep staff. So until we get that payroll protection money. So the idea was to just kind of be there to provide the things that we did have to the neighborhood. And I didn't really feel comfortable asking people for payment in this particular climate. Like it didn't feel right to me to be like, well, that's $5, you know? So what we decided to do instead was just start up a GoFundMe or allow people to leave cash that they thought was fair. And I've only had a couple people take things without paying, and I don't care, like that's what it was set up for. But the majority of the exchanges that we've had with people have been so generous because they understand like, hey, they're not an operation. They're trying to help us out and they're doing the best they can. It's been awesome to see the support that we get from the neighborhood in that regard.
That ties directly into being a part of the story of the neighborhood, is that you are absolutely 100% connected to what happens in this area. In fact, you are part of what happens in this this neighborhood. So
yeah, the success or failure of the neighborhood will directly affect us.
Yeah. So on to slightly more difficult questions. How is the landlord situation? How are you working with?
So the landlord was really, really helpful. Actually, before the shutdown order even went down, they offered to give us a break on rent for a couple months. So we're paying rent, but we're paying a modified amount for a couple months. And then I would imagine if this continues to stretch out, they'll probably stretch out that offer as well, but I have no way to guarantee that. But overall, they've been very good about it.
Yeah. I mean, this entire interview and everything that's going on, it just points back to one of the best ways to get through this is just helping each other out. So knowing that you have a landlord that's there with you,
totally
carrying the burden with you is pretty rad. How have your staff been holding up? The ones who you don't have the ability to keep them in house right now. Like, how are they doing?
They seem to be doing really well. We have a pretty good group chat about like, you know, the benefits they can apply for as far as unemployment and SNAP and all the utility assistance programs. We keep in pretty good contact about that so that everybody knows like, hey, when did you file? Did you get a check yet? What snafus are you running into? So we have that aspect of our group chat. And then we also have happy hours that we do with each other where we all have tequila because we're all addicted to tequila. Um,
Good drink of choice.
and, right. Well, you know, it's what we do. And then I've been working on the floors. I've been taking this downtime to refinish the floors in the rest of the restaurant to match the retail side. And people have been coming by to help out and like offer support and stuff like that. So we kind of pass each other on occasion, and we stay in really close contact on the phone. And everybody knows that I'm applying for the payroll protection program and want to get them back in there to help, and hopefully use that as a time to kind of reinvent ourselves for a streamlined machine so that we can weather whatever storm's coming next, because we know it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. We can dive into the whole, like, what are the SBA programs and the PPP program and how are those working out? We'll probably save that for maybe a couple weeks down the line. I might contact you again and see how that's going, because that's still in process of how that's
Totally.
Being unveiled and rolling out.
It's a long process.
Yeah. But my final question is just a history question, because one of the things that I think I've loved most.
Is it Charlemagne? No.
It's always Charlemagne. It's always Charlemagne. Next time I'm gonna make it Cleopatra. So there used to be a grand piano on the retail side. It was actually the overflow restaurant side at the time.
That's true.
And I sat and played that piano once. What happened to that piano?
I mean, if you think about all the things that have been in that space over the years, like what happened to the pool tables?
I don't think I ever knew there was a pool table.
The classic Nintendo and the couch. Like, we have had so many iterations of this space. And that piano has been in like both sides, both the east side and the west side of the restaurant, around a waiting area for a while. So that piano was gifted to us when the Day Music
Theater.
The Day Music, whatever, I don't know what the rest of that title is, the Day Music Company. When they were changing over and trying to become like a mixed use space, they had a bunch of pianos in there that they had to get rid of, and Paul Brainerd donated it to our space, and we had it tuned up. And my initial idea for the piano was that it would kind of be like, you know, when you go to Nordstrom's and there's like somebody playing classics on the piano, but I wanted somebody to play like modern pop classics, like shitty Madonna songs on the piano while you're having breakfast.
I could do that. If you ever do that, I could do that. I love that.
Yeah, it was a great idea, but it just never happened. And then, you know, we needed the space. So we ended up donating it to another person who had room in their house, who one of my employees hooked me up with. And it's getting used for sure.
Very cool. And so that came from basically across the street at the guy who owns the Day Theater. He has
or whoever used to.
He has another piano up there. I don't know if you've ever been up to the second floor. He has a piano that's like this box piano. It's super ornate looking, and it's absolutely beautiful. So it's good to know that that's a piano that comes from him, and it's in the neighborhood.
Comes from the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's everybody passing things in between each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, very cool. That's I just wanted to give everybody a chance to really connect with where you're at and give you an opportunity to speak to the neighborhood and let them know what you're up to, what you're facing, and how we have the opportunity to engage with you. So do you feel that the donation program will probably just keep going, or will that hit a material end at some point in time?
I mean, I think that like the end that we see, or like the middle point that we see, the turning point that we see, is when we get that payroll protection money and I can actually afford to have staff back in there and we can have modified service for people. And at that point, we won't, maybe we'll still use the donation system. I don't know. I mean, it seems to be working really well. It's a good way to avoid merchant processing fees, which nobody likes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, we still have to, you know, GoFundMe still takes their percentage, but for some reason it feels nicer to not be giving it to a big company.
That's right. All right. Well, I'm going to have this posted to the group later, but thank you very much for taking some time out and just letting us know where you're at. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks.